Well, hello and welcome back. I hope you can hear me. I've got a different setup at the moment. I'm not at home. I'm elsewhere at the moment, so I am just trying a new setup. I'm borrowing somebody else's setup, so I hope you are all doing well today. So we've got a lot to talk about, and I apologise I didn't get on the other day when I was trying to get on. Her life gets in the way sometimes, but we've got a lot to talk about. We've got to talk about the Chrisleys filings, responses. We're going to talk about the mess that's happening in the New South Wales government, in Parliament. They look like they're going to have to pay compensation now to BRUZ to terminate that position. It's a great big mess. And so we've got a lot to talk about, catch up with. Hello, Terry C. You can hear me fine? That's great. That's great. Hello, Angela. How are you doing? So, yes, there's a lot. And we just want to have a general chat about the spiraling that's also happening. Just the general Katie Joy stuff, because I know that she's called out Anna King. I mean, not Anna. I mean, Amy King, and she's still accusing. Oh, and because Lindsay's podcast dropped, that was very interesting. I don't know whether you got to hear that. That was a very interesting podcast. And the way it was done was very, very clever. And she walked straight into the trap. So I'm not on my computer. I'm on my computer. I've got one screen. So this could turn out anyways. I don't know how this is going to turn out. So I actually haven't read what the Chrisleys have written. So we're going to read that together and see the response. So how is everybody going? I'll just put on my Katie Joy disclaimer. So anyway. So let's start with the latest. Let's start with the latest stuff in relation to Barilaro. So we know that last week we found out that he got a top posting in a position in a job. And I hope you can still see that, because I can't see anything now, just the way on the single screen. And so it looks like now the government is looking for ways to undo the posting now. So they're a bit stuck. So it could cost taxpayers 39 weeks compensation. So as the crisis gets worse over the ill-advised appointment, the government are trying to look for ways to get themselves out of the mess. They've got themselves in a big mess. I don't know if you can see the tab. Hang on. Let me just go back here. I think I messed it up. Let me just add this. This might work now. There we go. Bit slow. Right. So it looks like they may have to pay 39 weeks compensation. So we know that this is ill-advised. So it says the Premier is believed not to have spoken personally to Barilaro. But what he's done is he's handballed the task to Investment and Trade Minister Stuart Ayres to fix the problem. So one government sources warned it could cost taxpayers should Barilaro, who is rumoured to have sought legal advice, seek his entitlement of a compulsory public service retrenchment. This is a mess. It's wishful thinking he will go without giving up the 39 weeks pay he's entitled to. Mr. Barilaro has so far declined the opportunity to discuss the matter with those close to him, declaring contractual obligations prevented him from speaking. Whether this is the case when he's called to give evidence at the New South Wales Upper House inquiry into his appointment remains to be seen, although the government will be desperately hoping the crisis will be done and dusted by the time the subpoena is in the mail. First up at the inquiry will be Investment New South Wales Chief Executive Amy Brown, who reported to Barilaro directly. And as Mr. Perrottet told State Parliament last week, later became the final decision maker in choosing Barilaro. A key question Brown will be asked when she appears on Wednesday will be why Barilaro was chosen over businesswoman Jenny West. Investment New South Wales had been preparing a draft of the contract before it was suddenly torn up. Brown had cancelled the independent recruitment process that was taking place the day before Barilaro announced his resignation. Something definitely smells with all of this. The other question is, why did the government move to make the role subject to ministerial appointment? And there's speculation. Government sources have speculated on the possible reasons. The cancellation included that there were issues with West's suitability, and that also Barilaro's political rivals wanted him out of Parliament, and so they gave him the plum job. So there's no there's no suggestion that there's any wrongdoing by Miss Brown. Now, the other thing is the new Liberal leader, so Scott Morrison after the federal election, stood down as leader. So this is Peter Dutton is now the new leader. And he turned up to a New South Wales Liberal Party headquarters meeting and read the Riot Act to party officials to tell them to pull their finger out. So it's very, very interesting as to what's happened here. So this has been a big, John Barilaro, for somebody that didn't want to be in the spotlight, has definitely got himself in the spotlight. So the state's most senior public servant was contacted in January by the woman who was overlooked for the USA Trade Commissioner role before John Barilaro was appointed. Department of Premier and Cabinet Secretary Michael Coates-Trotter received an email from former Investment New South Wales Deputy Secretary Jenny West after her expected appointment to the job was scuppered, which means removed. So let me just have a look. I'm just pulling this up. So she requested a meeting and expressed serious concerns in a report numbering some 45 pages about how she was treated. Her email subsequently was referred to New South Wales Investment New South Wales. The bureaucrat was the preferred candidate and had been preparing to take up the New York role before it was re-advertised in December. Barilaro was appointed earlier this month without the decision being presented to Cabinet, outraging Liberal ministers and backbenchers. It was one of 5 Globe Trade Commissioner roles Barilaro had created. So now the Premier is trying to distance himself from the appointment, which has now triggered 2 separate inquiries to examine the probity and integrity of the process. Perrottet said it would have been inappropriate for the role to be considered by Cabinet because it was not a ministerial appointment. Coates-Trotter was personally asked by the Premier to investigate the hiring process that led to Barilaro's appointment. On Saturday, he announced he would outsource the inquiry to EY consultant Graham Head. So the former Public Service Commissioner was engaged to ensure the utmost transparency and public confidence in the process. The Herald can reveal Barilaro was considered for the top job at Greyhound Race in New South Wales after Chief Executive Tony Mestroff announced his departure to become the new boss of Manly Sea Eagles last month. Several racing sources who are not authorised to speak publicly confirmed Barilaro had been the preferred candidate before he was offered the trained commissioner job. Greyhound Race in New South Wales Chair John Williams said Barilaro had not applied for the role, and the recruitment process was conducted by an external firm. So they will examine the process leading to Barilaro's appointment, any conflicts of interest that may have arisen, and whether his recruitment complied with the government's own rules for hiring public sector staff. It is separate to a New South Wales Upper House inquiry to start on Wednesday, when New South Wales Investment CEO Amy Brown will be the first witness to give evidence. So Brown, who reported to Barilaro when he was Trade Minister, was described by the Premier as the final decision maker in appointing Barilaro. It looks like they've already got the person they're going to throw under the bus. Leader of the opposition in the Upper House, Penny Sharp, said the Premier must explain why his department had outsourced its review into the US Trade Commissioner role. There are just so many questions that need answering, and we haven't heard from the government. They're not sending them. They need to not put John Barilaro on a plane until these inquiries are finished. An Investment New South Wales spokesperson said the date of Barilaro's commencement with Investment New South Wales and his onboarding were yet to occur. So if he hasn't done onboarding yet, if there's no contract signed, then they can show him the door, can't they? So this is a scandal. One Liberal MP who wishes to remain anonymous, to speak freely, said the situation was a disaster. Ultimately, the public expects someone to be accountable, and until somebody is, this will remain an ongoing disaster. So there have been internal emails reveal that General Counsel Chris Carr sought urgent advice around the same time about changing the process from public service to ministerial appointments. We are now asked to consider whether there are alternate methods. Specifically, we have been asked whether there is an option for ministerial appointments. The urgency driving this recruitment process are well advanced for the next batch of appointments, and there needs now clarify if this alternative is viable. The Upper House hearing Labor will probe what prompted Investment New South Wales to consider the role becoming ministerial and why it did not progress. So it would seem that there is huge issues for the New South Wales government at this point in time, and for John Barilaro. Now there is nothing to say that Barilaro has anything, that he's done anything wrong in this case, because I don't know. But definitely there are some questions that need to be answered, and this smells badly. So it's definitely really, really bizarre. And the timing of even Barilaro leaving the appointment, leaving politics to take this appointment is a... Now, if you don't know whether you saw Friendly Geordie's video the other day, but he actually unmasked PR Guy. PR Guy decided that he needed to come out and reveal himself. And just like we thought, PR Guy is just an average bloke who just wanted to set a different narrative to the media. Now, what was really clever about this is that they watermarked his face so that anyone that wants to use the media has this thing that Avi is a wife beater, alleged wife. Anyway, because he pleaded guilty to that, I believe. So, PR Guy has been revealed. Hello, Dom Doom. How are you? You're walking. I mean, hopefully you've been listening. I've just been hearing about talking about your mate Barilaro. So they haven't even done the onboarding process, but he may want 39 weeks pay if he doesn't take up the job. Well, I think he was offered, I think the job smells the way the process smells, and I think for integrity's sake, they all should just walk away. So now, let's get on to our next topic, which is, as Todd Chrisleys says, that YouTuber. Now, I haven't read these documents at all, so these are all new for me. So let's have a look. I heard he has or had a motion to dismiss. He replied to the motion to dismiss. I understand. Oh, here I am. I got to, because I'm not on my because I'm not on my double screen and I'm using StreamYard again, I'm very confused at the moment as to how it all works. Right. Let's go here. Right. So this was filed. When was this? I know this was filed a couple of days ago because I heard it was filed on the 18th. So it was filed a few days ago. So this was a reply memorandum in support of defendant's motion to dismiss. So essentially, Chrisleys filed a motion to dismiss, okay, the counterclaim. So we've got Katie Joy's filed a motion to dismiss and a counterclaim to Chrisleys' claim. We've now got Chrisley filing a motion to dismiss her counterclaim. So, all right, so let's have a look. So this is the reply in support of defendant's motion to dismiss. Plaintiff's claim. Oh, wait on. Oh, I picked up the wrong one. This is the wrong case. Hang on. This is the shins. Wait on. I've opened up the wrong one. I'm having not a great day at the moment, am I? That's the wrong one. Joanne, you opened the wrong one. I told you, I'm really out of it. I'm going, that's the wrong one. That's the wrong one. That's what I want. That is what I want. It's the one I want. It is the one I want. Ooh, ooh, ooh. All right. Here we go. Bingo. Now we're right. We're back on track, I think. This is it. The 7M one is still out for, so this is Chrisley's memorandum in law in support of motion to dismiss counterclaim. This is it. All right, so this is his motion to dismiss counterclaim. On October 18th, 2021, plaintiff Michael Todd Chrisley filed a suit against defendants Catherine Mansky-Polson and Without a Crystal Ball, LLC, to hold them accountable for their defamatory falsehoods. So this was filed on the 22nd. All right, filed on the 22nd. Ms. Polson has now retaliated with 3 groundless counterclaims for defamation, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress against Mr. Chrisley. And there's a footnote here. Ms. Polson also asserts the same claims against 3 other third-party defendants. To the undersigned's knowledge, none of the third party's defendants have been served as at the time of filing, and Ms. Polson has not filed any proof of service with the court. Each of Ms. Polson's claims fails under even cursory scrutiny. Her defamation claims fails because she attributes only one specific statement to Mr. Chrisley, and that statement is a constitutionally protected statement of opinion. Her harassment claim, likewise, fails as a matter of law because there is no private course of action under Minnesota Criminal Code for criminalizing harassment. Finally, Ms. Polson's claim for intentional infliction of emotional distress does not strike a claim upon which relief may be granted because she pleads neither extreme or outrageous conduct nor severe or emotional distress as a matter of law. Plaintiff Michael Todd Chrisley is a real estate investor, podcast host, and star of US Network's reality program Chrisley Knows Best. From the counterclaim, the program follows Mr. Chrisley and his family. Defendant Catherine Mansky-Polson is an internet personality and blogger producing content with a focus on reality television. Through her company, Defendant Without a Crystal Ball, LLC, she publishes commentary on reality television, among other topics. For the last several years, Ms. Polson has frequently published content concerning the Chrisleys. These publications included deliberate falsehoods that caused Mr. Chrisley to sue Miss Paulson for defamation. Miss Paulson has now filed an answer and counterclaim. In her counterclaim, she casts herself as the victim. She says that in response to her reporting on the Chrisleys family, Mr. Chrisley and his wife Julie have insulted her and her family on social media. She alleges that on one episode of his podcast, Mr. Chrisley offered the opinion that Miss Paulson is intent on destroying families and destroying people. But that is because she doesn't have God. She doesn't know God. Based on this and unspecified statements made by either Mr. or Mrs. Chrisley, who is not a defendant, Miss Paulson alleges that someone anonymously swatted her home and made false reports to the police or social services. Finally, Miss Paulson complains that Mr. Chrisley and Mrs. Chrisley, remember, Mrs. Chrisley's not been party to this, have insulted her husband and child, broadcast their desire to file other lawsuits against Miss Paulson, and privately messaged other individuals and requested that they join in harassing Miss Paulson and her family. From these allegations, Miss Paulson raises counterclaims for defamation, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Plaintiff now moves to dismiss each counterclaim under Minnesota Rule of Civil Procedure 12.02E for failure to state a claim. I'm hoping that if Graham Cracker is watching, this is how you file a counterclaim. This is how you file a motion to dismiss. Minnesota Rule of Civil Procedure 12.02E governs motions to dismiss for failure to state a claim upon which relief can be granted. Under Rule 12.02E, a pleading that fails to state a claim which relief can be granted must be dismissed. That's from Dakota Bank versus Eastland. The question for the court is whether identified counts in Miss Paulson's counterclaim set forth legally sufficient claims for relief. Again, more law. The court is to only consider those facts alleged in the counterclaim, accepting those facts as true and construing all reasonable inferences in favour of the non-moving party. So that means that everything the court... Oh, I just realised you're not watching this tab, are you? Sorry, you're just watching me read. Sorry about that. Should have yelled out. Yeah, it means that under the rules, her claims are true, and they have to prove why they're untrue. However, the court is not bound by legal conclusions in a pleading when determining whether a claim survives a motion. In other words, a claimant must prove more than labels and conclusions in a counterclaim. A motion to dismiss should be granted where it appears there are no facts that could be introduced consistent with the pleading exist which would support granting the relief demanded. The standard is met here and counterclaims should be dismissed. So here's our first one. Oh, thank you, Just Doom. So as I said, when you're not in your own environment, yeah, it's a bit confusing. So anyway, I don't have my double screen. But so the first one, Paulson failed to state a claim for defamation because she attributes only a single statement of protected opinion to Mr. Chrisley. While in Minnesota, general rules of pleading require only a short and plain statement of claim showing that the pleader is entitled to relief, defamation suits require greater specificity when pleading and have generally required the defamatory matter to be set out in verbatim. There's lots of case law there. Miss Paulson's counterclaim eschews this well-established case law and instead opts for generic and conclusory allegations that do not support a claim for defamation. Specifically, she alleges as follows. Now, this is straight out of her claim. In response to Miss Paulson's reporting on the Chrisley family, Chrisley and his wife Julie have continuously made personal attacks against Miss Paulson through their various media outlets to a large number of followers, including sophomoric attacks on her physical appearance and reckless allegations as her fitness of her mother. In episode 148 of his podcast, Chrisley stated that Miss Paulson is intent on destroying families, destroying people, but that is because she doesn't have God. She doesn't know God. In addition to his attack on Miss Paulson personally, the Chrisleys have chosen to attack Miss Paulson's husband and minor child, making demonstrably defamatory statements about them as well. So, from her counterclaim, from these scant allegations, Miss Paulson pleads her claim for defamation as follows. Chrisley made numerous false and injurious statements about Paulson and her family using his podcasts and social media platforms to publish and circulate these statements. Chrisley's false and libelous statements were published to one or more of the third parties and to the general public in general. Chrisley knew or should have known these statements about Paulson and her family were false. Chrisley made false statements asserting that Paulson had committed criminal acts and or was engaged in criminal activity and or would be understood as describing criminal activity. Miss Paulson has thus only identified one specific statement Chrisley made that Miss Paulson alleges to be defamatory. The Mr. Chrisley opined that Miss Paulson was intent on destroying families, destroying people, but that is because she doesn't have God, she doesn't know God. However, that is a statement of an opinion, as to which Miss Paulson cannot maintain a claim for defamation, as it is not sufficiently factual to be susceptible of being proved true or false. We said at that time that was a statement of opinion. Instead, the statement at issue is plainly mere rhetorical hyperbole, which is considered non-actionable. Miss Paulson's allegations are akin to those made in Alexander versus Strong, where the plaintiff raised claims for defamation based in part on the defendant's statements that the plaintiff and his wife were dangerous people or bad people. The Minnesota Court of Appeal noted that the characterizations of plaintiff and his wife as bad or dangerous were the sort of inherently subjective descriptions that Minnesota courts have held are incapable of being proven true or false, and ruled that the district court correctly concluded that the bad people or dangerous people statements were expressions of opinion rather than verifiable facts, which could not be defamatory. Similarly, in Larson and Garnett, the Minnesota Supreme Court held the statement, his mind must have really been messed up to do something like that, which speculated about the suspect's state of mind, not to be sufficiently factual to support a claim for defamation. The allegation at issue here is the same type, so it cannot support a claim for defamation. So for in McKee and Lorien, referring to someone as a real tool falls into that category of pure opinion, because the term real tool cannot be reasonably interpreted as stating a fact, and it cannot be proven true or false. In Hunter and Hartman, sports journalists' public criticism of the University of Minnesota's football program team's physician was an non-actionable statement of an opinion. In Iverson and Beekman, unfavorable professional reference letters were non-actionable statements of opinion. Accordingly, because the only statement identified in Paulson's counterclaim that can be contributed to Mr. Chrisley is a statement of opinion protected by the First Amendment, Miss Paulson has failed to state a claim for defamation. Well, that's interesting because, yes, even though she says that this has happened, there's only one statement that's come out of all of that. There's only one. So for the one statement, they have just banged it, knocked it on the head, and said, well, here are all the cases where it was deemed, a statement like this was deemed opinion. Moreover, Miss Paulson's improper and vague counterclaims and indiscriminately alleged that Mr. Chrisley made unspecified statements about Paulson and her family. But a statement is actionable as defamation only to the extent that it is of and concerning the plaintiff. Again, more case law. Miss Paulson's allegations fail for the additional reason that any statements Mr. Chrisley allegedly made concerning Miss Paulson's family are not of and concerning Miss Paulson, and thus are not defamatory as a matter of law. So the next one, there is no private cause of action for harassment under Minnesota law. Citing the entire Minnesota Criminal Code, Miss Paulson also brings a claim for harassment. There is no private cause of action under the provision of the Minnesota Criminal Code that renders harassment a gross misdemeanor. As the Minnesota Court of Appeals explained in affirming an order dismissing a similar harassment claim, because the legislature neither expressly or implicitly provided for a civil cause of action or civil remedies, the district court cannot correctly dismiss appellant's claim. Accordingly, the court must dismiss count 2 for failure to set a claim. So they quoted the whole Minnesota Criminal Code on a harassment, and the court has already ruled in previous cases that you can't bring there's no criminal action or no civil action for harassment. That's interesting, isn't it? So they're saying count 2's got to go. Ms. Paulson has pleaded neither extreme or outrageous conduct nor emotional distress. Ms. Paulson must plead 4 elements to support her claim of intentional infliction of emotional distress. She must allege Mr. Chrisley committed extreme and outrageous conduct. His conduct must be intentional or reckless. The conduct caused Paulson emotional distress, and the distress was severe. In Langslag versus KYMN, so that is the case law that backs that up. So usually there is 4 things you have to prove, and it comes, so that's the case that those 4 elements were determined. Her claim fails because she's not pleaded 2 of the 4 elements, even drawing all reasonable inferences in her favor. She has not alleged that either extreme or outrageous conduct or severe emotional distress. Minnesota law approaches IIED cautiously, keeping it sharply limited to cases involving particular egregious facts. As a result, a plaintiff alleging IIED must meet the rigorous requirements to survive a motion to dismiss. And again, case law. To qualify as extreme and outrageous, the conduct must lead an average member of the community to exclaim outrageous. Put differently, the conduct must be so atrocious that it passes the boundaries of decency and is utterly intolerable to the civilized community. As a result, insults, indignities, threats, annoyances, petty oppressions, and other trivialities will not suffice. Ms. Paulson also bears a heavy burden to plead severe distress. An individual's distress must be so severe that no reasonable man could be expected to endure it. And the thing is, they've made all of these standards so high because to try and stop people from pleading it, because, everybody pleads these. Paulson's allegations fall short on both counts. First, concerning whether the conduct alleged is extreme and outrageous. Paulson charges that in response to her reporting on the Chrisley family, Chrisley and his wife Julie have continuously made personal attacks against Ms. Paulson, including sophomoric attacks on her physical appearance and reckless allegations as her fitness as a mother. Having conceded that these alleged attacks are merely sophomoric attacks or reckless allegations, Ms. Paulson cannot simultaneously maintain that they are intolerable to the civilized community. Ms. Paulson instead alleges only insults and indignities and annoyances that fail to support a claim for IIED. Terry says, bet she pulls the medically fragile card to prove her point. Well, we'll see. As I say, I haven't read it. But yes, that's what she always does. Paulson further claims, in addition to Chrisley's attacks on her personally, the Chrisleys have chosen to further attack Paulson and her minor child. With each of these allegations, even assuming they are true, also fails within the restatement's rules that insults and indignities do not give rise to a claim for intentional infliction of emotional distress. Ms. Paulson also makes various allegations about harassment. The Chrisleys' reckless statements and vitriol regarding and directed at Ms. Paulson and her family have resulted in listeners anonymously swatting Ms. Paulson's home and calling the police and social services to make false reports. The Chrisleys have broadcast their desire for others to file lawsuits against Ms. Paulson and set up an email account to which they have requested people to send information about Ms. Paulson for the purposes of engaging in the same. Upon information and belief, Mr. Chrisley privately messaged other individuals and requested that they join in this harassment of Miss Paulson and her family. Notably, Mr. and Mrs. Chrisley are not alleged to have engaged in swatting. Instead, Miss Paulson alleges only that the insults or harsh words that the Chrisleys directed at Miss Paulson resulted in listeners swatting her home. However, Mr. Chrisley cannot be held liable via intentional infliction of emotional distress for criminal acts of third parties for which he has no knowledge. Moreover, the Minnesota Supreme Court held in Langslang that making false police reports and threats to take legal action did not rise to the level of extreme or outrageous conduct. The Minnesota Court of Appeals has likewise held that being subject to harassment and ridicule falls short of establishing a claim for intentional infliction of emotional distress. Thus, these allegations cannot give rise to a claim for IIED either. Paulson's remaining allegations are mere labels and legal conclusions that cannot withstand a motion to dismiss. Chrisley's conduct was extreme, outrageous, and beyond the bounds of decency tolerated in a civilized society. From her counterclaim, encouraging adults to harass and threaten children is objectively outrageous conduct intended to inflict emotional distress on Paulson. Chrisley's conduct was intended to cause Paulson and her family severe emotional distress and or perpetrated with the reckless disregard to the probability that the plaintiffs would suffer severe emotional distress as a result. In short, Paulson has tried and failed to plead any conduct that is so outrageous, so atrocious, that it passes the boundaries of decency and is utterly intolerable to the civilized community. Hubbard is the case. This is, by itself, ample reason to dismiss Miss Paulson's claim for IIED. Moreover, Miss Paulson never alleges that she suffered severe emotional distress because of the alleged infliction of emotional distress by Mr. Chrisley. This is the second and independent reason to dismiss Miss Paulson's claim for IIED. At most, Miss Paulson states that as a proximate result of Chrisley's false, defamatory, and harassing statement, Paulson and her family have suffered general damages, including emotional distress and mental suffering. However, Paulson's conclusory statements are insufficient to survive a motion to dismiss because generalized complaints of distress are insufficient to amount to distress beyond what a reasonable person could be expected to endure. Concluding that insomnia, crying spells, and a fear of answering the door, and a telephone, and depression do not sustain an intentional infliction of emotional distress claim. From Strauss versus Thorne. General embarrassment, nervousness, and depression are not themselves a sufficient basis for a claim of intentional infliction of emotional distress. According, even if the court were to find that Paulson pleaded extreme and outrageous conduct, her claim would fail because she included only a rote incantation of the elements and has not pleaded facts to demonstrate that she suffered severe emotional distress because of Chrisley's conduct. For these reasons, plaintiff respectfully requests that this motion to dismiss be granted and the defendant's counterclaims be dismissed with prejudice. So there you go. That is the document. That is pretty. That's a pretty solid document because you actually have to back up each statement with, you make your statement, you back it up with law, and then you tie it in together. That seems to be, yeah. So that, I believe, is going to the court on the 22nd of July. So it's going to be very interesting as to what happens there. I'd just say watch this space, I think. It's going to be definitely interesting. And finally, the BRUZ matter has been closed. Where are we? So there was a hearing on. Let me go back to StreamYard. So on the 22nd of June, There was the final order. The file is now shown as being closed. The respondent pays the costs of the proceedings on an ordinary basis until the 25th of August 2021 and on an indemnity basis on the 26th of August 2021. So he's just made a costs order now to state. So they had a hearing over the costs. So Google has to pay BRUZ's costs now. And the indemnity hearing, I think, is at some type of rate. So, yes. So that's the 20th of July at 1:30 p.m. is when that, I think that hearing is, those motions to dismiss are going to be sorted out. Anyway, that's really what I wanted to just briefly talk about. I'm going to we can talk in more detail later. As I said, I'm just out and about at the moment, so I thought I'd come on and do get this out there. But thank you all for joining me, and I will catch you again next time. Hopefully it won't be so long, and I hope you're having a great day, a great night, whatever time it is. I hope that it's good, and I will catch you again next time. Please make sure you hit the like button, the subscribe button. There's memberships available. You can send a thanks, which is like a super chat. Oh, Terry says, do I think BRUZ will get the Google money? I think time will tell. Time will tell. I don't know. I'm in two minds about it. I've had people say, yes, they will pay, but I think if they pay, that will open up a can of worms in Australia. And I still wonder whether BRUZ was trying to get to the US so he could enforce it over there. But I don't know what power Australian courts have in the US, I guess, at the end of the day. But it'll be interesting. I'm just going to keep watching this space. But anyway, so thank you for joining me, and I will catch you again next time. Bye for now.